imagine for a second that you are standing in a subterranean corridor.
Oh, I can already picture it.
Right. The air is freezing cold and it smells like wet stone and, just ancient dust.
Like a tomb.
Exactly. And you're holding a torch and its light is just barely pushing back the darkness enough to see these crumbling walls around you.
Which is terrifying enough on its own.
It is, but then you notice something completely impossible.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, the shadows at the edge of your vision aren't just, resting there. They are actively creeping forward.
Actively creeping. Oh,
So Canic sets in, right? You cast a magical illumination spell, expecting the whole area to just flood with brilliant light.
as you do in a fantasy game, yeah.
But instead, this floating void of absolute pure blackness just drops from the ceiling and literally drinks your magic.
It just eats the spell.
Eats it. The spell completely dies. Your torch flickers out, and you are totally blind, miles beneath the earth. And then you hear something clicking in the dark.
Okay, that is just pure nightmare fuel right there.
Right. Welcome to Into the Megadungeon, everyone. You are tuning in for our 6th deep dive on the channel, and today we are strapping on our packs and heading deep underground.
We really are. It's a masterclass in tabletop tension that we're looking at today.
It really is. And, for those of you who were with us during our last session, our 5th deep dive, we spent all our time unpacking the 3rd issue of the Old School Essentials Carcass Crawler zine.
Yeah, that was a great discussion. That issue was entirely focused on expanding the horizon, right? Like giving players all these wild new tools to conquer the known world.
Exactly. But the source material on our desk today, which is Carcass Crawler issue 4, it does the exact opposite.
I mean, if our last discussion was about exploring the sunlit world, today is basically about extinguishing the sun entirely.
That is a perfect way to put it. Our core mission for you today is to dissect exactly what this specific material offers for a referee. Specifically, a new referee who wants to elevate their game.
Because when you think about traditional fantasy role-playing, the default mode is usually this very bright, heroic power fantasy.
Right, you picture the knight in shining armor.
Exactly. Knights, wizards casting colorful fireballs, adventurers just kicking down doors in fighting rooms full of goblins.
It's loud, it's action-packed, and the heroes usually win.
Yeah, it's triumphant. But the material we are pulling apart today forces a complete paradigm shift.
It really pulls the camera away from that shiny heroism, right?
It does. It zooms way in on this creeping, claustrophobic darkness. It focuses on grueling resource management.
And the deeply unsettling magic that exists at the fringes of the world.
The underlying philosophy here is that the dungeon isn't just like a static box waiting for heroes to arrive and loot it.
No, the environment itself is an active, malicious participant.
It's an ecosystem that actively rejects the players. And to survive that, you can't rely on the standard character archetypes. You need a very specific kind of adventurer holding that torch.
Which brings us perfectly to the new character classes introduced in this issue. Because before a referee can run a survival horror game, they really need to know who is walking into the dark.
Right, who are the heroes?
Exactly. We are presented with 3 distinct classes that completely reevaluate how players interact with the game world. And I want to start with the Halfling Hearthsinger.
Oh, I love the Hearthsinger. Because usually when you see a halfling in an old-school tabletop game, they are completely pigeonholed.
Yeah. They're always the burglar, the sneaky rogue hiding in the shadows.
Always. But the Hearthsinger completely subverts that expectation. It focuses on the cultural heart of the halfling archetype instead of just, their physical size or stealth.
They're positioned as the ultimate lore keeper, right?
Exactly. The lore keeper and the morale booster for their community. They don't use stealth to avoid conflict.
So what do they use?
They use the power of storytelling, folklore, shared history. They use that to completely rewrite the social dynamics of a given situation.
So they function almost like a charm spell.
Yeah, like a localized charm effect, but one that is entirely rooted in sociology rather than arcane mind control.
Okay, let me make sure I understand the mechanism here, because that sounds incredibly potent. Are you saying a player can just talk their way out of a dungeon encounter by telling a good story?
Well, not a monster encounter in the heat of battle. You can't just start telling a story while a goblin is swinging a sword at your head.
Right, that wouldn't make much sense.
No. The mechanics require a captive audience and uninterrupted time. If a Hearthsinger can hold a room's attention by performing a captivating tale for a solid block of time, this mathematical calculation happens behind the scenes based on the audience size.
And what happens to the audience?
A certain number of those listeners will experience a fundamental shift in their disposition. They will actually begin to view the Hearthsinger as a genuine friend.
Like an actual ally?
Yeah, to the point where they might actively come to the halfling's defense if a fight breaks out later.
Wow. That fundamentally changes how a party approaches a neutral faction.
It completely flips the script.
I mean, if you walk into a suspicious village, or maybe a mercenary outpost deep in a megadungeon, usually the rogue tries to sneak around and steal the keys.
Right, which usually ends in disaster.
Exactly. But here, the Hearthsinger buys a round of ale, stands on a table, and tells this legendary saga. And suddenly, half the room considers them an old friend.
It is a brilliant mechanical reward for leaning into social roleplay. But their utility extends way beyond just making friends.
Oh, because of the oral tradition stuff.
Exactly. Because they are the keepers of oral tradition, they are unparalleled scholars of the esoteric. They possess this unique ability to decipher non-magical dead languages.
Just by knowing old songs.
Yeah, simply by cross-referencing ancient dialects they've encountered in local folklore. And on top of that, they use this vast knowledge of tales to identify magical items.
So they don't need a wizard to cast an identification spell.
Nope. A player can literally look at a glowing sword the fighter just pulled out of a tomb, roll against their class ability, and remember an old wives' tale about a blade that glows blue when subterranean creatures are near.
That is incredibly flavorful. It really grounds the magic of the world in the culture of the people.
It makes it feel lived in.
And it ties directly into their rumor gathering mechanic, right? Because they're so integrated into tavern gossip, when they enter a new town, they actually gather double the amount of local rumors compared to a standard adventurer.
Which is huge for a referee trying to drop adventure hooks.
But the aspect of the Hearthsinger that truly caught my eye was their endgame.
Oh, the high-level stuff.
Yeah. In a lot of old school systems, when a fighter hits a high enough level, they attract an army and build a castle. When a cleric hits the level cap, they build a grand temple.
And the Hearthsinger does something entirely different. They build a bustling tavern.
I love that so much.
It's great. Once they accumulate enough wealth and renown, the mechanics actually dictate that they establish a pub. And it's not just flavor text.
It's a fully functioning economic engine, isn't it?
It is. The tavern generates monthly revenue for the player. It automatically attracts a staff of younger halflings who arrive to help run it.
And doesn't it attract a bouncer, too?
Yeah. It attracts a seasoned fighter who takes up residence to act as the tavern's dedicated bouncer.
It's like they become a fantasy franchise owner, like a public relations manager for the whole village.
It anchors the character in the world in such a cozy, tangible way. They're literally building a brand based on good vibes and local legends.
But if the Hearthsinger represents the warmth of the village center, this second class, introduce the Halfling Reeve, represents the absolute opposite.
The contrast is completely intentional. If the Hearthsinger is the firelight in the pub, the Reeve is the freezing rain on the borders of the wild.
That's a great visual.
This class is designed as a dedicated, rugged protector of the wilderness. And interestingly, the design is heavily inspired by early conceptual drafts of classic fantasy literature.
Oh, the Tolkien connection.
Yes, if you look at the foundational drafts of Tolkien's work, the ranger character, who eventually became the human Aragorn, was originally conceived as a halfling named Trotter.
That piece of literary trivia is just wild to me. The idea of playing the prototype Aragorn as this rugged, mud-splattered halfling completely changes the visual aesthetic of a ranger.
It really does. And the mechanics of the Reeve perfectly reflect that frontier protector vibe.
What kind of mechanics are we talking about?
Well, they receive very specific combat bonuses when fighting the traditional enemies of halfling settlements. So creatures like goblins, wolves, and other raiding threats.
Makes sense for a border guard.
Exactly. They also possess extraordinary stealth capabilities when navigating wilderness environments. And as they level up, they actually gain access to a very specific pool of divine magic.
Like druid magic.
Yes, spells you would typically associate with a druid or a nature-attuned cleric, allowing them to manipulate the environment to protect their borders.
But the most defining feature of the Reeve, I think, isn't their magic or their combat bonuses, it's their extreme vow of poverty.
Yes, this is a massive mechanical shift.
The rules dictate that a Reeve can only keep the wealth, coins, and magical gear that they can physically carry on their own person or on their personal mount.
Right, no banks, no treasure hoards.
Every single copper piece of excess wealth they find in a dungeon has to be donated back to a halfling community.
which is a masterstroke of design because it completely short-circuits the traditional motivation for playing a tabletop RPG.
Yeah, I mean, in most systems, the primary loop is simple. Enter the dungeon, kill the monsters, extract the treasure, and get rich to buy better gear.
Right, and in a lot of older systems, gold literally equals experience points.
Exactly. So what happens when a player character is mechanically forbidden from hoarding wealth?
Well, the rules explicitly state that the Reeve cannot use loopholes. You can't just give your excess gold to the party's wizard and say, hey, hold on to this for me.
That would be cheating the vow.
Right. The wealth must be given away to the community, and this forces the player to adopt a completely different motivation.
They're no longer exploring the mega dungeon for personal glory.
Or financial gain. They are venturing into the dark, strictly to eliminate existential threats to their people. It turns a mercenary into a selfless guardian.
And their endgame reflects that selflessness perfectly. Instead of a profitable tavern, a high-level reeve establishes a remote hunting lodge out in the dangerous wilderness.
It serves as a patrol base, and it attracts younger, low-level reeves who come to serve as border patrols.
It paints this incredibly atmospheric picture of a solitary sentinel standing between the monsters and the innocent villagers.
It's very thematic.
It really is. Now, that covers the halflings, but there is a third class introduced that I have some serious reservations about, and that is the Arcane Bard.
Ah, the Arcane Bard.
The text describes this as a nostalgic homage to the jack-of-all-trades characters from older editions of the game.
That is definitely the mechanical lineage, yes.
Okay, let me play devil's advocate here for a second, because this sounds like a potential disaster for a new referee.
How so?
Well, this class can wear heavy chainmail armor. They have access to thief skills, allowing them to hear noises through doors and pickpockets. And on top of that, they can cast arcane magic just like a magic user.
They do cover a lot of ground.
If I am running a game, how am I supposed to balance encounters around a character that can fight reasonably well, steal things, and cast spells? Doesn't a class like this just completely step on the toes of the dedicated magic users and thieves sitting at the table?
It's a valid concern.
I mean, why would anyone play a pure thief if the bard can do their job and cast a sleep spell?
You are touching on one of the most heavily debated topics in class-based game design. Niche protection.
Yes, niche protection is crucial.
The fear is always that a versatile character will steal the spotlight from the specialists. However, if you look closely at the mathematical progression of the Arcane Bard in this specific rule set, it is actually a tremendous gift to a new referee.
A gift? How is throwing a Swiss Army knife into a delicate ecosystem a gift?
Because their versatility comes at the steep, uncompromising cost of specialization. Let's break it down mechanically.
Let's hear it.
Yes, the Arcane Bard can attempt to pick a pocket or disarm a trap, but the percentage chance of success will never, ever rival that of a dedicated thief of the same level.
So they're worse at it.
Much worse.
Right.
And yes, they can cast arcane spells, but their spell progression is painfully slow. They will never gain access to the devastating high-tier magical artillery that a pure magic user commands.
They're stuck with the lower level stuff.
Exactly. And while they can wear chainmail, they lack the hit points and raw combat bonuses of a pure fighter.
So they are effectively mediocre at everything.
I wouldn't use the word mediocre. I'd say they have the ultimate contingency plan.
Contingency plan, okay.
Think about it. In old-school gaming, failure is common and it's often lethal. If the dedicated thief fails their role to pick a crucial lock and the mechanism is jammed, the party is stuck.
The adventure just halts.
Right. The Arcane Bard provides a secondary chance. Or, when the magic user exhausts all their spell slots in the first 2 rooms of the dungeon, which happens all the time, the Bard still has a trick up their sleeve to help the party survive the journey back to the surface.
They're the backup generator.
Yes. They are the glue that holds the party together when the specialists hit a roadblock. They ensure the narrative doesn't grind to a halt just because of a single bad dice roll.
I see. So they aren't the star of the show at all. They are the ultimate supporting cast member.
Exactly. Versatility is their strength, but they will never outshine the core classes at their specific jobs.
That actually makes a lot of sense. And looking back at all 3 of these classes, they do something really brilliant. They take world building and embed it directly into the character creation screen.
You aren't just choosing a mechanical function. You are choosing a cultural role in the society of the game world.
Precisely. Which creates a very natural bridge to the next major component of the source material. Because once a referee understands the cultural background of the heroes entering the dungeon, they have to understand the cosmic forces those heroes and their enemies actually worship.
The theology of a fantasy setting dictates the morality of the world.
And the deities introduced in this issue are a far, far cry from the benevolent gods of light and healing you might expect.
That is putting it mildly.
The entities outlined here are wonderfully weird, they are deeply unsettling, and they demand an intense, visceral devotion from their followers. We are moving entirely away from the halfling hearths and into the domain of the grim and gritty.
It's a very dark turn.
I want to dive straight into my absolute favorite and arguably the most disturbing addition to the pantheon, the Black Alderman.
Oh, the Black Alderman is a magnificent piece of dark fantasy design. He is described as the grimacing god of skulls, dentistry, and macabre music.
Dentistry, I can't get over that.
It's so specific. His divine domain is envisioned as this endless, half-buried mausoleum. But what makes this deity so compelling for a referee to utilize is not just his aesthetic. It's the incredibly evocative cult practices required of his followers.
The practices are wild. It states that followers are ritually required to collect the teeth from their defeated foes.
Just casually collecting teeth.
Yeah, and it gets more intense. If the foe they defeated was particularly powerful or deemed worthy by the cult's strange standards, the cleric is required to decapitate the corpse and take the entire skull to be preserved in their hidden temples.
Think about how that alters the post-combat routine at the table.
It changes everything.
Traditionally, after a battle, the fighter wipes the blood from their sword, the thief searches the bodies for gold, and the cleric might offer a brief prayer.
Right, a nice clean wrap-up.
But with a follower of the Black Alderman in the party, the cleric pulls out a pair of iron pliers and begins a gruesome, meticulous dental extraction on a dead goblin.
It immediately establishes a dark, occult tone without the referee having to say a single word.
It's entirely player-driven horror.
It is incredibly grim, and it bleeds into how they interact with society. The material notes that some of these cultists actually operate in the open world as traveling bone setters and dentists.
Which is terrifying if you need a tooth pulled.
Right. And they use medical instruments crafted entirely from human bone to play eerie, sacred songs as a form of prayer.
And the spells they receive. They completely replace the standard cleric spell list with unique, highly thematic magic.
Give us an example, because standard clerics get, like, purifying food and water.
Right. Instead of casting a spell to purify water, a cleric of the Black Alderman can cast a spell that animates a severed skull, allowing the cleric to literally speak through it from a distance.
So it's an occult walkie-talkie.
Basically, yeah. They can also cast magic that animates a pile of loose bones into this dancing macabre frenzy to distract or terrify enemies.
Like a terrifying xylophone.
Exactly. And the most terrifying part is they possess a spell that allows them to magically seize control of a skull.
Okay, wait.
And the rules specify that this spell works whether the skull is lying dead on the ground or if it is currently attached to the neck of a living person.
No way. Really?
Yes. They can literally drag an enemy around by taking magical control of the bone inside their head.
That is... wow. It paints this picture of a cleric that feels genuinely dangerous and alien.
It's brutal.
And the other dark divines detailed in the issue follow this exact same philosophy of intense, thematic magic that completely redefines the cleric's role. For example, there is Carcass.
Carcass.
Yeah.
A god entirely focused on brutal, uncompromising survival and aggression.
Yeah, a cleric of Carcass is not going to cast gentle healing spells to soothe your wounds.
No, their magic is violent and miraculous. They can cast spells that allow a warrior to completely defy a lethal, fatal blow, keeping them standing through sheer divine fury.
Just pure adrenaline and rage.
Or, alternatively, they can target enemies with magic that induces violent blood rages, forcing an opponent to drop all their defensive tactics and blindly attack their own allies.
And then there is Moom. This is the god of the underworld and shadows. This is a deity whose magic is entirely focused on mastering subterranean environments.
Which is perfect for a Megadungeon.
Exactly. If a standard cleric summons a swarm of insects to attack a foe, a cleric of Moom casts a spell that temporarily phases a 5-foot hole straight through solid, unyielding rock.
The utility of that in a dungeon environment cannot be overstated.
It's game-changing.
It allows the party to bypass locked vault doors, avoid deadly traps in the main corridor, or just escape a pursuing horde by creating a literal hole in the wall.
And in a moment of absolute panic, a cleric of Moom can cast a spell that instantly grants them a flawless supernatural sense of the shortest, most direct route to the nearest dungeon exit or staircase leading up to the surface.
Like an arcane GPS.
Yes. And as a secondary benefit, the spell actually alerts them to any mechanical traps along that specific escape route.
The Cleric of Moom essentially becomes the ultimate spelunker. They are the perfect guide for a deep delve.
But, as fascinating as all these spells are, the most striking mechanical addition to these cults is the concept they call marks of servitude.
The Marks of Servitude. This is a brilliant piece of design.
It really is. It physically anchors the abstract concept of divine magic right into the reality of the character's body.
As a cleric gains experience, levels up, and unlocks access to higher tier, more powerful spells, their physical body is permanently, irreversibly altered by their devotion to their god.
The divine energy demands a physical toll on the mortal vessel.
Yes, magic has a cost.
And the examples given are incredibly visceral. For a follower of the Black Alderman, gaining access to first-level spells means your character develops a sickly, pallid complexion.
Just looking unwell.
Right. But when they reach third level, the magic demands more, and all of their hair permanently falls out.
It escalates quickly.
And it gets worse. By the time they reach fifth level and are casting powerful magic, their eyes completely transform, becoming solid, featureless black orbs.
The progression is similarly dramatic for the other deities, too. A follower of the survival god, Clath Karnath, will first develop glowing red irises.
That's fairly intimidating.
Oh, it gets more intense.
Yeah.
As they grow in power, intricate, serpentine tattoos will spontaneously manifest and writhe across their limbs. Eventually, they develop terrifyingly thick, bulging veins across their head and neck, constantly pulsing with this aggressive energy.
And for the underworld god Mum, the cleric's fingernails turn ragged and pitch black. Their skin gradually takes on a bruised, violet hue.
And at the highest levels, their actual physical shadow becomes monstrous. It stretches and moves in ways that are entirely disproportionate to their body.
Okay, stop right there. I have to look at this from the perspective of a player sitting at the table.
Sure.
If I am investing months into playing a character, trying to level them up and make them a legendary hero, why on earth would I want my reward to be that my character gradually transforms into a creepy, hairless, black-eyed monster?
It sounds like a punishment, right?
Exactly. Isn't the whole point of gaining levels to become cooler, not to become a social pariah? How does a referee justify this mechanic without angering the player?
That is a very understandable reaction, and it cuts to the heart of what makes this specific source material so unique. You are viewing leveling up through the lens of a traditional power fantasy.
Where more power means looking more heroic.
Right. But this toolkit is designed for dark fantasy, where power always comes with a terrible price. From a referee's perspective, the Marks of Servitude is a flawless execution of the show-don't-tell principle in world building.
How so? Walk me through that.
In a standard tabletop game, if a level 1 cleric and a level 10 cleric walk into a tavern side by side, they look virtually identical to the untrained eye.
Maybe one has a shinier shield.
Right. But their inherent magical power is totally invisible. With the Marks of Servitude, a high-level cleric of a dark god is visually flagged to the entire world.
Yeah, everyone can see it.
The players see it, the non-player characters see it, the enemies see it. It forces the player to engage in incredible, unscripted role-play opportunities.
Give me an example of how that plays out at the table.
Imagine the party needs to negotiate with a suspicious town mayor for supplies. The party's cleric steps forward to speak. But the cleric has solid black eyes, no hair, and skin the color of a corpse.
Oh, that mayor is going to freak out.
Exactly. The mayor's going to react with absolute terror or extreme deference, or perhaps call the town guard. The player can no longer just roll a charisma check and expect a standard outcome.
Their physical appearance, dictated by their mechanical power, fundamentally alters how the world interacts with them.
It strips away the idea that magic is just a superpower you download from the sky. It proves that channeling the raw power of a god burns the conduit.
That completely flips my perspective on it. It turns a mechanical upgrade into a really profound narrative consequence.
It makes magic feel dangerous again.
And that overarching philosophy, the idea that magic is not just abstract math, but something highly tangible and physical, doesn't stop at divine magic.
No, it extends to arcane magic as well.
Because not every character relies on faith. The magic users rely on intense study, intellect, and alchemy. But just like divine magic changes the flesh, arcane magic in this issue becomes intensely physical.
Starting with a complete reimagining of the most fundamental tool a wizard owns, the mage's grimoire.
Yes, Historically, in the vast majority of tabletop campaigns, a wizard's spellbook is nothing more than an administrative tool.
It's essentially a spreadsheet on the back of the player's character sheet. They just use it to track which spells they have learned and which ones they have prepared for the day.
It has no physical presence in the narrative unless a thief tries to steal it.
Right. But this issue completely transforms grimoires into highly coveted, unique magical artifacts in their own right.
They aren't just generic leather-bound books anymore. They have history, they have bizarre physical properties, and most importantly, they grant passive magical boons just for owning them.
The rules state that if a magic user takes a full, uninterrupted week of downtime to simply sit down and rigorously study one of these specific grimoires, they unlock these passive benefits.
And the examples the text provides are wonderfully evocative. Consider the grimoire that functions as a bestiary for magical creatures.
It isn't just a book about monsters.
No. The book itself is a slim portfolio bound in actual living black and tan fur.
Living fur.
Yeah. If a magic user studies this tome and keeps it on their person, they receive a mechanical reaction bonus when interacting with specific creatures, like warp beasts and blink dogs.
And the best part is the environmental effect. The mere physical presence of that furry book literally prevents those two natural enemies, the warp beast and the blink dog, from attacking each other if they're in the same room.
The book itself radiates an aura of pacification.
Or consider another example, a ragged, ancient tome completely wrapped in rusted copper wire.
Oh, this one is great.
When the magic user undoes the clasp and opens it, the book doesn't just lay flat, it magically hovers in the air next to them, suspended by invisible, arcane strings.
Just floating there.
Yeah, and mechanically, if the owner of that hovering book casts a charm spell on an enemy, the enemy suffers a mathematical penalty to their resistance roll. The sheer weirdness of the book makes the wizard's mind-altering magic more potent.
You know, this solves a major problem I've seen in a lot of games. Eventually, finding a new spellbook becomes boring for a player.
They just copy the spells and toss the book.
Exactly. They find a book in a dungeon, they copy the two spells they don't know into their own book, and then they throw the old book in a corner or sell it for a few gold pieces.
By making the books themselves powerful artifacts, it makes loot exciting for magic users again.
It's like a fighter finding a legendary named sword, but designed specifically for the nerd of the party.
It creates an economy of esoteric knowledge. A wizard might carry 3 different bulky grimoires, swapping them out depending on whether they need to pacify beasts or charm guards.
And keeping with this incredibly tactile, physical theme of magic, the issue takes a deep dive into alchemy. It heavily expands the mechanics surrounding potions, or as they call them here, strange brews.
The strange brew section is fantastic. The text breaks down the rigorous referee mechanics for exactly how much time and how much gold it takes an alchemist to craft potions.
Which scales exponentially based on the spell level of the intended effect, right?
Yes, but the absolute genius of this section is the strict requirement for monster ingredients.
This is perhaps the most elegant referee tool in the entire issue.
I completely agree. To brew specific, powerful potions, you cannot just buy generic herbs from a market. You need specific, highly thematic monster parts.
For example, if a player wants a potion of clairvoyance, allowing them to see over vast distances, the alchemist requires the pulverized bone of a cyclops.
Because it's a creature defined by its singular powerful eye. It makes thematic sense.
If you want a potion that allows you to magically control human minds, you need the severed tongue of a harpy, a monster famous for its enchanting, mind-altering song.
And if you are ambitious enough to want a potion that controls giants, you have to go out into the world and physically harvest the heart of a storm giant.
From a game design perspective, requiring monster parts solves the dreaded shopping episode problem.
Yes, the shopping montage. It kills pacing.
In so many campaigns, when players return to town with gold, the game just grinds to a halt as they spend an hour looking at equipment lists and buying potions from a vendor.
By requiring a harpy tongue, the referee instantly turns an administrative shopping task into an active, urgent adventure hook.
Let's paint a picture of how that works at the table. The players say, "We have 1,000 gold, we want to buy 3 potions of flying."
The referee doesn't just subtract the gold and say, okay, write them on your sheet.
Right. The referee says, the alchemist looks at your gold and shakes his head. He says he has the base liquids, but he needs the primary catalyst, the primary flight feathers of an adult griffin. Bring those to me and I'll brew your potions.
Exactly. Suddenly, the players aren't shopping. They are researching the migratory patterns of griffins.
They're planning an expedition.
They are organizing an expedition to the high peaks. They are planning a trap to secure the feathers without killing the beast or preparing for a deadly aerial battle.
A simple desire for a potion has organically generated 2 sessions worth of intense gameplay. The players are actively driving the narrative forward.
It is brilliant. But my absolute favorite rule in the Strange Brew section is the sampling mechanic.
Oh, the sampling rule is so good.
In older editions of tabletop games, finding a mystery potion is a terrifying experience. You don't know if the glowing blue liquid is a potion of healing or a deadly, fast-acting poison.
So players just hoard them.
Exactly. This issue introduces a rule where a player can take a tiny, microscopic sip of an unidentified potion.
They don't consume the whole thing.
Right. But that tiny drop gives them a one-round sensory hint of what the potion will do if fully consumed.
It provides a massive amount of narrative flavor while solving a mechanical stagnation.
Yes. If a player sips a potion of diminution, a shrinking potion, they might feel their perspective shift as they physically shrink an inch for about 3 seconds before popping back to normal size.
If they sip a potion of levitation, they feel incredibly weightless, and their boots might hover half an inch off the dungeon floor.
If it's a potion of heroism, they experience a sudden, intense chemical rush of courage and adrenaline that makes their heart hammer against their ribs.
It turns identifying potions into a high-stakes magical wine tasting. Ah, yes, I'm getting notes of old oak, a hint of crushed blackberry, and oh dear, my left arm is currently turning into a cloud of gaseous vapor.
It is a highly entertaining scenario, but as you mentioned, the mechanical fix it provides is crucial. It elegantly solves what is often called megalixir syndrome.
Where players are notorious for hoarding unidentified potions in their backpacks forever.
They are paralyzed by the fear that drinking an unknown liquid will instantly kill their character.
By granting them a sensory hint through sampling, the referee empowers the players with just enough information to use their resources tactically.
It encourages them to interact with the strange elements of the world rather than hiding from them.
It's all about pushing players to actively engage with the environment. And believe me, they're going to need every single one of those potions and every scrap of magic from their grimoires.
They really are.
Because as we shift our focus to the next portion of the text, the environment stops being a passive backdrop entirely.
You can have the most hardened heroes equipped with Cyclops bone potions and hovering spellbooks, but absolutely none of it matters if you are plunged into pitch blackness and cannot see the jaws closing around you.
Which brings us to the core thesis of the issue, turning the concept of dungeon darkness into an active, malicious combatant.
This is where the survival horror elements truly lock into place.
The text introduces an entire, terrifying ecosystem of monsters whose biological or magical purpose is designed around the manipulation, destruction, and consumption of light.
It taps directly into humanity's most primal, hardwired fear of the dark. We are not dealing with standard goblins who happen to live in caves.
These creatures literally are the dark.
And we have to start with the Grue, which is perhaps the purest, most terrifying distillation of this theme.
The Grue is not an animal. It is an entity composed entirely of pure magical darkness.
It stalks the desolate, abandoned areas of the Megadungeon, and it is completely 100% immune to normal weapons.
So a fighter can swing a broadsword at it all day, and the blade will just pass through the freezing shadow.
It won't do a thing. What makes the Grue uniquely dangerous is how it interacts with magic.
Standard light spells, like the kind a wizard might cast to illuminate a hallway, cannot penetrate the aura of magical darkness the Grue naturally projects.
The light just stops at the edge of the shadow.
The only way to truly harm or even repel a Grue is to cast a high-level, light-generating spell directly onto the physical mass of the creature itself.
The players must use illumination as a literal damaging weapon.
And the description of the creature is pure nightmare fuel. If a player happens to have magical dark vision that can pierce the gloom, what they see is just a chaotic, shifting mass of spindly limbs and a central gaping mouth.
It is horrifying. But if the Grue is a creature that hides within the dark, the next entity, the Stygian Sphere, actively creates the dark by devouring your safety net.
Yes, the Stygian Sphere. This is a brilliant piece of anti-magic design.
These are floating, 3-foot diameter orbs of absolute geometric blackness. They drift silently through the corridors.
Biologically, they feed on the life energy of living creatures, but more importantly, their primary food source is magical light.
Let's break down exactly how devastating this is. Say the party wizard casts a continual light spell on a rock, creating a permanent glowing beacon that the party uses as their primary light source.
Which is a very common tactic.
Very common. But if a Stygian sphere approaches, it doesn't just dim the light. It actively absorbs the magical radiation, permanently cancels the spell, and uses that arcane energy to regenerate its own hit points.
It eats your magic to heal itself.
And the defensive mechanism of the sphere is equally cruel. If the party decides to attack the sphere physically, or threatens it with a spell, the sphere can rapidly expel the light energy it has consumed.
Like a flashbang.
Yes. It emits a blinding, strobing flash of intense light, designed to completely incapacitate the party, leaving them blind and vulnerable in the dark.
So you have monsters made of darkness and monsters that eat magical light. But what about physical light?
What about the mundane torches and oil lanterns the party relies on?
Enter the lantern moth. These are not your average porch bugs. These are 2-foot-long, carnivorous, subterranean insects that are completely frantic and aggressively drawn to heat and light.
When a swarm of lantern moths encounters an adventuring party, they do not target the heavily armored fighter. They specifically swarm the character holding the primary light source.
And their primary method of attack isn't a bite or a sting, right?
No. Their goal is to physically bash their heavy bodies against the lantern or the torch, attempting to knock it out of the character's hand and smash it on the stone floor.
But the danger doesn't stop when the lantern hits the floor. The rules explicitly state that these giant moths are covered in a strange, highly flammable dust.
Oh, this is the worst part.
If a moth bashes a torch and the flame catches its wing, the moth combusts.
This creates an incredibly chaotic, dangerous situation.
You have the party fighting in dimming light, trying to avoid being swarmed by frantic, burning 2-foot-long insects that are setting the dungeon floor on fire.
It creates a tactical nightmare. The players are forced to decide whether to drop their light to fight with both hands, risking total darkness, or to keep holding the light and make themselves the primary target of the swarm.
It's sheer panic. But as terrifying as the moths are, the issue goes a step further into a category of monsters I can only describe as resource saboteurs.
Resource saboteurs. These are creatures that don't attack your hit points at all. They attack your inventory.
And this is where the design gets incredibly devious. Let's talk about the oil mites.
The oil mites represent a profound shift in how a referee challenges a party. These are tiny 2-inch-long scavengers that have evolved a carapace that looks exactly like a small, rough piece of dungeon rock.
They just blend in perfectly.
They cling to the ceilings of caverns, completely motionless, waiting for heat signatures to pass underneath.
Let's walk through the exact mechanics of what happens when a party walks under an oil mite, because it is diabolical.
Okay?
The party walks through a doorway. The referee secretly rolls a die. If the oil mite drops, it lands silently on a player's backpack. The player doesn't feel it.
They have no idea.
Over the course of the next few minutes of exploration, the mite wriggles into the pack, finds the glass flasks of lamp oil the party relies on, and secretes an acid that melts the corks.
And then it proceeds to silently drink every single drop of lamp oil the player is carrying.
The psychological impact of this mechanic is phenomenal. A player might explore 3 more rooms, confident they have plenty of resources.
Then their current lantern starts to sputter.
Yeah.
They confidently tell the referee, I reach into my pack and grab a new flask of oil.
And the referee, with a slight smile, replies, you reach your hand in, but the flasks are completely empty, and you feel something small and rock-like shifting at the bottom of your bag.
The sudden realization that they are trapped in the dark without fuel is a far more potent fear than simply taking 4 points of sword damage.
And as a cruel, beautiful bonus, if the party discovers the mite and tries to kill it with a torch, or if it is accidentally exposed to any open flame, the mite explodes.
Because its entire digestive tract is full of combustible fuel.
It is a masterpiece of nuisance design, and joining the mites in this category of saboteurs are the pyrolators.
The pyrolators manipulate the environment in the exact opposite way. These are massive, 7-foot-long subterranean lizards.
Their bodies are composed of jagged rock and glowing internal magma.
They do not attempt to extinguish your torches. Instead, their internal body heat is so intense that it alters the atmosphere around them.
Any mundane flame within 30 feet of a pyrolator begins to burn at a terrifyingly accelerated rate.
The text states that a standard torch, which normally provides an hour of reliable light, will burn itself to ash in a matter of minutes if a pyrolator is nearby.
The players will literally watch their wood turn to charcoal before their eyes.
But it's not just a penalty. It creates a dynamic tactical zone. Because the air is superheated, if a wizard casts a fireball or any fire-based magic near the lizard, the damage output is dramatically boosted.
It creates a high-risk, high-reward scenario where fire magic is lethal, but using it means sacrificing your visibility.
It forces the players to constantly evaluate their environment. And that environmental evaluation becomes even more difficult when you consider the sensory disruptors.
Because eventually, players will try to bypass torches altogether, right? They will rely on racial abilities like infravision, the ability to see the heat signatures of living creatures in the pitch black.
But the Megadungeon ecosystem has evolved to counter that too.
Enter the infacamilians.
Yeah.
These are reptilian predators that have developed the biological ability to actively camouflage their internal body heat.
To a character relying on thermal vision, the infrachameleon is completely 100% invisible.
They blend perfectly into the ambient temperature of the cold stone walls. And just to make them extra punishing, if they get close, they spit a highly corrosive acid that instantly rusts and destroys metal armor.
They are the perfect ambush predator for a dark environment. But the ecosystem also includes active jammers, like the strobers.
A strober. It's a blind, hulking, spiky, boar-like creature that has lived in the deep dark for so long it has lost its eyes entirely.
It hunts purely by sound and smell, but because it is completely blind, it has evolved a highly specific defense mechanism against predators that hunt using heat vision.
The mechanism is wild. The strober's body constantly emits rapid, oscillating waves of intense heat and freezing cold.
To a human eye, it just looks like a blind boar.
Yeah.
But to a character using thermal vision, looking at a strober is like staring directly into a high-powered strobe light in a dark room.
Rapidly shifting heat signatures completely overwhelm and blind the character's infravision.
It effectively shuts down the primary sensory advantage of characters like elves or dwarves.
But perhaps the most thematic, and certainly the most tragic entity in this dark ecosystem, is the Torchbearer's ghost.
We have to talk about the morality of the hireling system first.
Yes, in old-school gaming, a common tactic is for players to pay a few copper pieces to an unarmored, untrained peasant from the local village to carry a lantern and follow the party into the dungeon.
Just keeping the player's hands free for weapons. Inevitably, when a dragon breathes fire or a trap goes off, the frail torchbearer is the first one to die a horrible, screaming death.
It is a dark reality of the genre. The players often view these hirelings as disposable equipment.
The torchbearer's ghost turns that callousness into a mechanical consequence. These are the tragic, incorporeal spirits of those dead peasants.
They haunt the deep corridors, filled with resentment and seeking revenge against the adventurers who led them to their doom.
And their attack is brilliant. They don't try to scab the heavily armored fighter. They know exactly how the dungeon works.
Their primary attack is to manifest and exhale a highly focused magical gust of freezing wind, specifically designed to instantly extinguish every torch and lantern the party is holding.
They plunge the party into the same terrifying darkness that they died in.
Okay, I have to stop here. I need to push back heavily on the sheer cruelty of this entire section of the book.
Proceed. I'm listening.
Look at the oil mites specifically. If I am a player and an invisible rock bug just secretly drank all my lamp oil without the referee even rolling a die on the table for me to see, I am going to be furious.
But it's a fair reaction.
Doesn't that feel incredibly unfair? Doesn't it feel like the referee is abandoning their role as an impartial judge and just acting like a cheating antagonist trying to screw the players out of their basic ability to see the game board?
It is a vital question. And if handled poorly by a novice referee, it can absolutely feel punitive and unfair. But we have to look at the genre this material is trying to emulate.
Survival horror.
Exactly. I would frame these mechanics as a masterclass in shifting the axis of tension.
Explain the axis of tension.
In a standard fantasy game, the tension is almost exclusively tied to the depletion of hit points. If a monster hits you with a sword, your numbers go down. When the numbers hit 0, you die.
Right. It's very direct.
It is a very linear, predictable form of anxiety. By introducing creatures that target light and resources instead of health, the referee shifts the tension from a linear combat calculation to a complex tactical puzzle.
So it's about making them think differently about the space.
Precisely. If an oil mite ruins your oil flask, you are not instantly closer to dying. Your hit points are full, but you are suddenly much closer to being blind in a highly hostile environment.
The players can no longer just confidently march forward, assuming they can outdamage whatever they find.
They have to start tapping the walls, measuring their oil consumption, constantly checking the ceiling, and planning their retreat paths.
It elevates a simple walk down a cave corridor into a terrifying survival horror experience.
The dungeon itself feels alive, hostile, and reactive. It demands meticulous preparation and a healthy dose of paranoia, which is exactly the tone this issue is striving to teach the referee.
That makes perfect sense. It shifts the anxiety from, will I survive this specific sword swing, to a much broader creeping dread of, will I have enough light to survive the long walk back to the surface?
It makes the environment the primary antagonist.
And speaking of the environment, let's look at how all these disparate elements, the halfling lore, the dark gods, the strange potions, and the light-eating monsters, actually come together at the table.
Which brings us to the final major component of the issue, the included adventure module, Noximander's Cave.
This is where the zine moves from theoretical design into practical application.
It shows the referee exactly how to construct a cohesive, ready-to-run experience using the toolkit provided.
And it anchors this environmental puzzle box in a deeply tragic narrative surrounding a character named Noximander.
The backstory here is fantastic. Noximander was a highly skilled, ambitious illusionist who became dangerously obsessed with the realm of darkness.
He developed a theory that a wizard's shadow was actually a dormant magical entity.
He attempted an incredibly dangerous, highly experimental arcane ritual to literally, surgically cut away his own shadow from his feet,
Intending to imbue it with sentience so it could serve as his perfect dark mirror and servant.
It is the classic hubris of the wizard. But the tragedy stems from his choice of location.
Noximander was performing this delicate ritual deep within a forgotten cave system that was once a dedicated temple to Moom, the god of the underworld and shadows we discussed earlier.
The ambient, lingering, divine corruption of that dark god bled into the arcane ritual and twisted it horribly.
I liken it to a surgeon trying to amputate their own shadow, but they used a scalpel that was heavily infected with a flesh-eating virus. The amputation worked, but the infection spread.
Noximander successfully severed the shadow, but during the tearing process, the newly liberated shadow ripped away half of the illusionist's actual cognitive mind.
So now you have two fractured entities inhabiting the cave. The severed shadow, possessing half of Noximander's intellect and a cruel, skittish cunning, creeps around the deepest corridors.
Meanwhile, Noximander's corporeal body is left half feral. He sits in the dark, chewing on subterranean moss, eating bugs, and experiencing vague, agonizing flashes of memory.
He's acutely aware that he is missing a fundamental piece of his soul. It is incredibly sad, and it sets a somber, terrifying tone for the player's exploration.
And the layout of his lair is a masterpiece of environmental design. It is a puzzle box that perfectly utilizes the ecology of monsters we just spent so much time analyzing.
It is a brilliantly designed, logical ecosystem. The module notes that the entrance to this cave system is hidden behind a demolished, ancient cellar wall beneath a major city.
This makes it incredibly easy for a referee to drop this adventure into any ongoing campaign.
Once the players step through that broken wall, the specific monsters naturally fit the environment. For example, there is a fast-moving, freezing subterranean stream cutting through the rock.
The referee doesn't just place random goblins there. That is where the infrachameleons cling to the wet walls, perfectly camouflaged, waiting to drag slipping players into the icy water.
The ceiling of the main entry cavern is specifically noted as being crowded with oil mites, acting as an invisible toll booth for any party entering with lanterns.
Deeper within, in the areas where the natural light from the cellar completely fades, the grooves prowl the unlit corridors.
And the specific rooms are so intensely flavorful, there is a location called the Dark Garden.
The Dark Garden is a perfect example of synergy. It is a cavern filled with ancient debris and overgrown with thick black creeper vines.
Within the vines grow strange, midnight-blooming flowers that violently shrivel and die if exposed to sunlight.
And what biological creature feeds on the nectar of those dark flowers? A massive swarm of lantern moths.
They are perfectly naturally positioned to attack the party's torches the exact moment a curious player steps forward to investigate the strange flora.
It makes biological sense within the fantasy world. Then, deeper in, you have the Gargoyle Gate.
The Gargoyle Gate is a heavy, magically locked set of stone double doors. Flanking the doors are two imposing gargoyle statues, each standing with their stone hands outstretched, palms up.
The trick is that physical force, lockpicks, and standard knock spells will not open the doors.
The only mechanism that triggers the lock is placing an object emanating magical light into the open hands of the statues.
It forces the players to expend their precious, limited magical resources just to progress through the dungeon. They have to give up their light to move forward.
And all of this careful resource drain leads directly to the climax of the adventure, where the party finally confronts the severed shadow.
But what I love about this is that it completely subverts the expectation of a boss fight.
Exactly. When you reach the end of a dungeon, players are conditioned to expect a massive brute force combat encounter with a monster possessing hundreds of hit points.
The confrontation with the shadow is entirely different. When the party finds it, the shadow is simply lounging in the darkness, casually blowing smoke rings made of pure, concentrated shadow.
When the party approaches with weapons drawn, it doesn't attack. It tries to terrify them by shape-shifting its form against the walls, and then it immediately turns and flees down a specific corridor.
It actively avoids a direct fight. It intentionally tries to lure the heavily armed players into a pursuit, drawing them into a specific, pre-prepared chamber.
And that chamber is densely populated with Stygian spheres, the floating voids that aggressively consume magical light.
The shadow uses the environment as its primary weapon. It is an ambush designed entirely to strip the players of their greatest advantage, their vision.
It forces the players to realize that they cannot win by just swinging a sword harder.
If they chase the shadow blindly, they lose their light, the spheres blind them with flashes, and the shadow picks them off in the pitch black.
They have to stop, evaluate the room, realize the trap, and use lateral thinking. Perhaps they use a strange brew potion to fly over the spheres, or perhaps the arcane bard uses a mundane trick to distract the shadow.
It requires engagement with the mechanics. Looking at it holistically from a game design perspective, this module is a perfect study guide for a referee.
It doesn't rely on inflated math to challenge the players. It uses the interplay between the ecosystem, the light, and the dark to teach the players the exact mechanics and themes introduced in the rest of the issue.
It rewards careful preparation, environmental awareness, and tactical retreat over raw aggression. It is the definitive guide on how to run a survival horror session in a fantasy setting.
Okay, wow. We have covered a massive amount of ground today, from halfling lore keepers to light-eating voids. As we move to wrap up this deep dive, let's try to summarize the core value of Carcass Crawler Issue 4 for the listener.
Whether you are a brand new referee trying to figure out how to challenge your friends, or a 20-year veteran looking to spice up a stagnant campaign, this issue provides something invaluable. It is a comprehensive toolkit.
It is a toolkit for taking the abstract, easily ignored concept of darkness, something we usually just wave away with a simple torch mechanic, and turning it into a tangible, terrifying, and highly interactive pillar of your game world.
It effectively makes the absence of light just as dangerous, if not more so, than the monsters hiding within it.
It reminds us that in the deep, forgotten places of the world, the humans, the elves, and the halflings are the invaders. The subterranean environment does not want them there.
The ecosystem will actively work to consume them.
The issue provides the unique classes equipped to handle that dark, the grim gods who revel in it, the physical magic drawn from it, and the terrifying monsters composed entirely of it. It is a masterfully cohesive, tightly focused piece of game design.
It truly is. It demands the players respect the dark.
And as we bring today's session to a close, I want to leave you, our listener, with a final provocative thought to ponder for your own campaigns.
A parting thought. I like it.
We've talked so much about the physical mechanics of shadows today. Gods of the underworld, rituals to sever shadows, creatures born of absolute dark.
Right.
But conceptually, our shadows are merely tethered to us by the light we carry. They are a projection created by the fire we hold.
That's true.
So I ask you, what happens to our characters' literal and metaphorical identities when that light is completely, permanently consumed by the Megadungeon? If the light defines the shadow, who do these heroes become when they are left in the absolute, unending dark?
A profoundly chilling question to end our descent on.
Thank you so much for joining us for this extensive session of Into the Megadungeon. We hope you found some dark, twisted inspiration to bring to your next table. Keep your lanterns fueled, always check the ceiling for mites, and we invite you to return next time as we continue to unpack the greatest secrets the tabletop world has to offer.